Hi, welcome everybody. My name is Marta Suarez. I am the president of Dynamic Spectrum Alliance, and I would like to thank you for attending this webinar today, titled TV White Spaces, Latest Advances on Regulatory Frameworks, Ecosystem, Commercial Development Status, and Social Impact. We will explore that license-exempt broadband services in TV White Spaces are already up and running. Regulatory frameworks are in place in different countries, the technology is proven, radios have been certified, there are even new deployments coming to market soon, and commercial deployments are underway. So this is a very exciting subject, and I hope that at the end of this session, you will have a broader vision of the TV White Spaces ecosystem and some insights about how important this technology is for last mile connectivity, complemented with other access technologies. I would like to thank the speakers that have kindly accepted to join this workshop, high-level delegates from different countries and industry representatives. I also want to thank Microsoft for making this possible and sponsoring the session. This DSA webinar is brought to you as part of our 2020 Global Summit campaign. The DSA Global Summit was planned for the first week of June, and given the impact that COVID-19 is having on the world, the DSA has agreed, in the best interest of the Alliance and the summit attendees, to postpone it until first week of November. So please save the date from the 3rd to the 5th of November. Let me clarify some logistic details for this session. The speakers and the attendees are in different virtual rooms. So please write all your questions in the chat, and a moderator will transmit them to the speakers and panel moderators. We will use the social media hashtags DSA Global Summit and Dynamic Spectrum to engage in discussion during this webinar, and it will be recorded and available soon on the DSA website. Having said that, I will introduce our first speaker, Vicky Robinson from Microsoft. Vicky is the Senior Director of the Urban Initiative in the US. Welcome, Vicky. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Martha, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Microsoft was founded on the idea that democratizing access to technology would enable more people to reach their full potential. The Urban Initiative builds on this foundation as we work with others to close the digital divide, and in the process, deliver on our company's core mission to empower communities to achieve more. If you could advance the slides, please. One more. Thank you. For many, high-speed internet access is as ubiquitous as having access to electricity and running water, creating a whole new level of connectedness that has fostered growth in our educational institutions, our economies, and our government. But as the global population as we sort of consider this issue, not everyone has had the same access and benefit that this technology affords. In fact, nearly half of the world is still not using the internet. This gap actually disproportionately affects those that are low income, elderly, female, and illiterate. Moreover, people in rural areas are disadvantaged as traditional infrastructure fails to go the last mile in low density regions. The rural divide is real, and without a bridge to cross that gap, millions of people are left behind. Next slide, please. In the US, when we look at broadband coverage information provided by the Federal Communications Commission, we know that at least 18.3 million people, of which a little over 14 million residing in rural areas, lack access to broadband. There's strong evidence, however, that that number is actually larger. The great news is that the FCC and others are looking at the data set to fine tune it to get a better assessment of what the actual broadband gap is so that we can close it. Next slide, please. In Latin America, Asia, and Africa, at least 3 billion people are not using the internet, and over 1 billion people lack access to reliable energy, which makes broadband connectivity an impossibility. In addition, the UN State of Broadband report found that broadband adoption has slowed and progress is especially elusive in low-income countries and rural areas across the globe. Most of the connected population relies on low-speed basic cellular service, and only 14% of the global population has an in-home internet subscription, which is really unacceptable. Next slide, please. Microsoft is determined to do our part to close the digital divide. The Airband initiative, which is global in scope, has the ambitious goal to work with internet service providers and others to extend broadband access to 3 million people who lack that access in the United States and 40 million globally by July of 2022. Next slide, please. This isn't an initiative we do on our own, and Microsoft itself isn't becoming a direct connectivity provider. Instead, as part of our work in this space, we're partnering with a network of people comprised of internet service providers, equipment manufacturers, nonprofit organizations, and others that are all aligned around a common goal, connecting people and bringing with that connectivity the opportunity for a better life. Next slide, please. Airband relies on a four-part approach. The foundation of our work really again centers around partnerships with internet service providers to provide affordable, reliable internet access services. We also work to remove regulatory obstacles to enable the use of innovative, cost-effective technologies like TV white spaces that ultimately help our partners to extend their networks quickly in unserved remote areas. We then work with our partners and other stakeholders to enable digital transformation in newly connected areas with a focus on efforts to support innovation in agriculture, healthcare access, rural entrepreneurship, and telemedicine, as well as off-grid energy sources where necessary in order to improve productivity and livelihood. We also focus on our work to create a larger ecosystem to actually support our partners financially, whether it's leveraging public or private funding in an effort to scale more quickly as they work on these connectivity projects. Next slide, please. Over the last 3 years, we have made significant progress against our goals and are moving full steam ahead to accelerate our work even further. To date, we actually have 100 active projects across the world spanning 20 countries. Here in the US, we have partnerships spanning 24 states and Puerto Rico, with the majority being large-scale projects that will extend broadband access to tens of hundreds of thousands of people within a given region. In fact, to date, these projects have extended access to over 1 million people that previously resided in unserved rural areas, and this is just the beginning. Through our work outside of the US, we have provided broadband access to nearly 16 million people, of which 14 million reside in predominantly rural areas. As we partner with our partner network deployments, and then with the plan to accelerate over the coming months, we will be reaching many, many more. Further, we continue to extend our reach through engagement with hundreds of providers through the Global Airband ISP program, which provides specific assets which are needed to extend broadband connectivity, including things such as discounted access to equipment, as well as digital skilling assets, which are vital, again, to drive broadband adoption. This program actually has over 650 organizations across the world that are taking advantage of these vital assets as we work to close the broadband gap. A lot of this work has been fueled by the adoption of regulatory frameworks that allow for the use of innovative technology solutions, such as TV white spaces, without which it would be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to provide broadband access. In fact, there are 12 countries globally with TV white space regulatory frameworks in place. Next slide, please. Airband ISP partners are leveraging a hybrid toolkit approach that uses a combination of TV white spaces alongside access to fiber optic and satellite access technologies in order to expand broadband connectivity. As called out in the slide, TV white spaces can travel larger distances and penetrate obstacles that have traditionally inhibited connectivity in rural and remote areas. As such, we believe that this technology is a vital tool in the Internet connectivity toolkit. In fact, we're confident that a mixed model that employs a mixture of wireless and wired technologies can dramatically reduce the cost and time of extending broadband access to rural communities across the globe. Next slide, please. The key to our work is the work of regulators, and we're very appreciative and encouraged by what we're seeing globally. Earlier this year, the Federal Communications Commission initiated a rulemaking proceeding that could expand the use of TV white spaces to do more in broadband and narrowband deployments. More recently, South African regulators also awarded licenses to 3 companies to provide TV white space-based connectivity networks during the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, TV white space regulations are underway in quite a few countries around the world. A lot of great work has been done, but there's more work to be done to fully unlock the potential of wireless spectrum-enabled technologies as a key to closing the broadband gap across the world. I look forward to continued dialogue and engagement. Thanks for your time and welcome to the summit.
Thank you very much. And thank you for this presentation. I would like to remind all the participants that if you have any questions, you can write them in the chat, and the moderator will transmit those questions to Vicky and the team. Let's now move to our regulatory panel discussion. So we have 4 delegates from different countries. Commissioner O'Reilly from the FCC in the US, Peter Ngig from Communications Authority of Kenya, Commissioner Moises Quiroz Moreira, Commissioner from Anatel in Brazil, and Engineer Austin Walun, Director of Spectrum Administration from the NCC Nigeria. So we will start this panel by Commissioner Moises Quiroz. I will invite you please to join the session with your cameras for one moment. Commissioner Quiroz Moreira is a public manager. He is currently a member of the Board of Directors of the National Telecommunications Agency in Brazil, Anatel. He has many years of experience working on the telecom sector, and I would like to start by him, given the fact that Brazil has recently published a public consultation about the use and implementation of TV white spaces in Brazil. So, Commissioner Quiroz, Moises, could you please tell us about that public consultation and about the reasons why Brazil is considering TV white spaces?
Good morning, everyone. President Marta Soares, thanks for your question. I will answer it in my short presentation. Please, the next slide. Okay. The public consultation of white space regulation in Brazil is an item of the biennial regulatory agenda of Anatel 2019-2020. It was approved on Anatel's board meeting, occurred on May 28, 2020, after a regular discussion among the commissioners and the technical areas. The resolution is now under public consultation, which will conclude its work on July 18, 2020. Please, the next slide. Thanks. The main objective of Anatel with the white space regulation is to provide broadband access to rural areas in Brazil, a country with more than 80 million square kilometers. It's larger than the continental US and known for its regional disparities and vibrant agribusiness. Nowadays, not only urban, but also rural population and the companies need a high-speed internet for their entertainment and professional use. The deployment of white spaces technologies complements other measures already in development in Brazil, like 4G and 5G auctions, and the General Plan of Universalization goals. Nevertheless, and very important, the use of white space devices cannot affect the current and the future of TV broadcasting the Brazilian population. The main outline, the next slide. The main outlines of the document submitted to public consultation are as follows. The possibility of using VHF and UHF frequencies for broadband communication, fixed telephony, and limited services. The allocated band will be divided in 6 MHz blocks following the Brazilian Digital Television System scheme. The resolution that is under public consultation will be complemented by Anatel's Board Act that will define the technical criteria regarding the use of the blocks. Please, the next slide. The operation of white space device will be controlled by a geolocation database method that will identify the available radio frequencies and each location and decide if a white space transmission is possible with a given power, frequency, and the other technical aspects. Additionally, Anatel will define all the responsibilities and designate one or more public or private entities to administrate the database. The next slide. As told before, the TV broadcasting service must be protected, since they are the primary service in these frequencies. Therefore, the use of white space device must discontinue their cooperation if a new TV broadcasting service is authorized in a given location and frequency, and the database predicts incompatibility between transmissions. The main goal of this rule is to forbid that the white space devices impact the future use of the spectrum by TV broadcasting companies in those locations. Besides, the services using white space devices must respect the regulatory rules, mainly those concerned with service authorization. Another important aspect of the proposal is that Anatel can determine the suspension of transmission by white space devices in case of interference on the TV broadcasting systems. The idea is that the database administrator can do it regardless of any action of the regulator in the field, which is Anatel. The next slide. Another relevant aspect is that it was identified that the low VHF band in Brazil, corresponding to the frequency range of 58 to 72 MHz, is no longer in use by broadcasting systems in locations where the analog TV has been turned off. So, if the industry and the market find a possible path to implement white space devices in this frequency range, the operation should be facilitated. As a final remark, I would like to say that the use of TV white space probably will have a large impact in Brazil, and is a great opportunity for the expansion of internet access in the country. As I told you before, Brazil is a large country, and it has a vibrant agribusiness that is in need of good quality and fast internet access that has not been provided by the current telecom companies. Next slide. Okay, it's everything I had to say for you for now. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Commissioner Moises. We will continue with the other panelists, and then we will take the questions at the end of these presentations, of these first introductions. I have also received some questions about the urban initiative, but I will keep them until the end of this panel. So please send your questions. The moderator is taking good care of them. So now I would like to invite Commissioner O'Reilly. Commissioner O'Reilly is a commissioner at the FCC. He has championed unlicensed spectrum access in the US since the beginning, since many years ago. And as you know, the FCC has recently opened a notice for proposed rulemaking for unlicensed white spaces devices operating in the TV bands. And the FCC has already received comments and reply comments. So I would thank Commissioner Riley for joining this session today. And I would like to ask you if you could please share with us some details about those proposed modifications that are under consideration, and also the vision of the FCC about TV white spaces. Commissioner Riley.
Start that again, I guess. They must have, does that work now? Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. I apologize for the technical difficulty. They must have turned my microphone off when I wasn't looking. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I want to applaud Microsoft for all the work that they've done to re-energize the work of TV white spaces in the United States. We've had a great deal of recent activity after a long debate. I've been working on TV white spaces for about 15 years in the United States in many different forums. And it's just the last couple of years which really picked up pace and really provided benefits to the American people, especially in those areas that Vicky talked about, the hard to reach, the rural farmlands of the United States. What we've done recently in our proceeding is asked questions and put out for proposals. Can we extend the reach of the networks? Can we provide more flexibility and more opportunity to providers that are using TV white spaces for different purposes to expand their networks? And for a give example, with higher power limits, higher antenna reaches, can we offer new services such as narrowband IoT? And how do we protect incumbents in the most lack of density populations? How do we deal with that? You know, can we stretch out the population protections? And all those things are being considered now. As Martha indicated, our comment periods are closed, and I've got a commitment to go to order later this summer to early fall. So we'll conclude that at the FCC, and then provide more certainty to those that are working hard in this space and bringing this technology to the American people. We're really excited on what it's able to do, and really excited that we're able to connect. As Vicky indicated, we have greater population, upwards of 20 million people who don't have broadband access today, and this is a very positive technology to help address those needs. We already have 1 million people connected already, but we can see that the numbers increase, and complement that with all the other efforts the Commission is doing. It just recognizes how important broadband is to everybody.
Thank you, Commissioner, for this kind introduction and for this mention to the FCC vision. I will please stay online because we will have more questions from the audience. Thank you. And now I would like to invite Peter Gig from the Communications Authority of Nigeria. Peter, please, if you can turn on your camera so we can see you. And I wanted to ask you about the recent consultations you had in Kenya. So Kenya has been actively working also on dynamic spectrum access, and you published the draft rules for TV white spaces. You had an open consultation, you received comments from different stakeholders, and I would like to ask you about that. Please let us know about the process itself, and also let us know about the long-term vision that you have for dynamic spectrum access in Kenya.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon for those who are in this part of the world, and good morning for those who are on the other side. As you know, Communications Authority of Kenya has taken a strategic initiative to develop a framework for authorizing the use of TV white space spectrum used by telecommunication services, and the preliminary steps towards the wider adoption of the dynamic spectrum access in other bands. So this is because we realized that the rural and underserved areas require, for them to get connectivity, we require a new approach to the spectrum management front. And what we did is that we have a strategic, we have these embedded in our strategic plan and our national broadband strategy as a country, and in our strategic plan as an organization, a regulatory body. So we then partnered with 2 universities, that's the University of Strathclyde in the UK and the Strathmore University here in Kenya, to do research on the best method when it comes to things like the database ecosystem, the equipment, and use case scenarios, including how to protect incumbent services from getting interference. So we've come up with a framework which is undergoing validation currently, and approval of this framework, which will now usher in kind of a commercial use environment, is awaiting approval anytime soon. So once we get it in place, we'll be able to move now from what we call the trial phase to a commercial phase. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm open to any questions that might come up today.
Thank you very much, Peter, for this introduction. I have to say to all the participants that we were expecting Mrs. Wanju to join the session, but unfortunately she had some last-minute issues and she was not able to attend today. So I have been receiving many questions from the participants. Don't worry, we will take care of them and we will ask them. But now I would like to introduce Engineer Austin Mowing. And I would like to ask from the NCC Nigeria. And we know that Nigeria has recently published its broadband plan, and TV White Spaces has an important role in that plan as a solution for broadband connectivity. So Nigeria has also published some rules for TV White Spaces. They have received comments from different stakeholders. They had a workshop in March this year. And we know that is the process is ongoing. So I would like to ask Engineer Austin about this broadband plan for Nigeria, and how do you think the TV White Spaces rules are going to impact that national broadband plan?
Yeah, thank you very much. Like you said, the broadband plan recognized the importance of TV White Spaces in Nigeria, and has given a timeline when we expect that everything about the guideline will have been concluded. That is Q4 of 2020. But I must let you know that we are making every effort, because we know the importance of the TV White Space to the advancement of broadband deployments in hard to reach areas in underserved and unserved areas. So we're not taking it lightly at all. However, there are steps that need to be followed before that can be concluded. And all through the process, we have been in consultation with Dynamic Spectrum Alliance, and everything we have done in partnership with you. Where we are at the moment is that we have published the guideline for industry comment, and comments have been received, our contributions have been received. Just yesterday, I looked through the response of, because we have a committee, we have a team that are working on it. I looked through the response that I gave and gave my own comment. So they updated the document and are currently updating the guideline because it does not stop at spectrum administration. It would have to get to the board for approval. So the next that will happen after now, after the guideline is updated, is to pass it through our legal team. And it's at their discretion what to do next. If they think that the consultation that we have done is adequate, then they might not need to go through the public inquiry. But the Act requires that for such guidelines and regulations, they go through public inquiry. Public inquiry, public consultation look almost like the same, that we, Spectrum, will not guide them on what to do. We tell them they were part of the consultation also that we did, so we think that it might not take long. They might just review the guideline and not have to pass it through industry consultation anymore, because it's the same people who you are still going to consult that have been consulted already. So like I said, Nigeria take TV-wide spaces very seriously and are doing everything to ensure that we'll bring it on board. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Engineer Ingwaliun. So now I will take I had some questions prepared, but our attendees are very active and we have received many questions in the chat. So I will move to those questions. If you want, you can all turn on your camera so we can all be, the panelists can join this session of questions. So one of the questions, this was for Commissioner Moises. Thanks for the presentation. Do you identify that the unused spectrum? How do you do it? By prior planning or remote sensing? And also, do you foresee the same sort of wide spaces devices being capable of using the VHF band? So probably,
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry. The unused spectrum will be identified by a geolocation database, which will consider the authorized TV stations and another white space device already in use. This could be complemented by remote sensing, but the criteria is still to be defined in forthcoming acts. Regarding the use of the low VHF band, as I told you, the use this spectrum will be facilitated because it has few use in the country, following the analog TV shutdown. But we still need the response of the industry about the possibility of manufacturing equipments. I don't know if you understand me.
Yes,
okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. This question is also for you, from Beatriz Sanuti, head of the Digital Access Program, British Embassy in Brasilia. So she says, I understand that there is a great effort by the Brazilian government to increase the digital services offered by the government. However, there are challenges of connectivity due to cost, sustainability, grid, etc., particularly on rural areas. How does Commissioner Queiroz see the potential of TV white spaces use to help bridge that gap? And how is Anatel engaging on the digital government agenda?
Okay, Anatel is fully engaged in the digital government agenda, as a TV white space is less costly to implement. We expect that it can help to face the connectivity gap, mainly in rural areas. Nevertheless, there are still aspects to be defined after the public consultation also. Anatel has a number of the other initiatives for solving connectivity gap, such as the discussion about the first and also convergence commitments being discussed for 5G spectrum auction. Okay.
Okay, thank you. And now you're talking about 5G. I will take also one of the questions and I will address it to Commissioner O'Reilly. In order for commercial broadband wireless technologies such as 5G to be adapted for use in TV white spaces, the spectral requirement as specified in FCC Part 15H for TV white spaces devices may need to be changed. Does the panel, and if anyone else has any comments, does the panel have any thoughts on the possibility of adopting 3GPP as the conformance framework for TV white spaces devices and opening up TV white spaces spectrum to 5G technology?
So I appreciate the question. We first, make sure my, yes, good. We first worked to, with a broadcast incentive auction to shrink the amount of spectrum that was allocated to broadcasters over many years. And now we have a pretty consistent portfolio for to be used for TV white spaces within the broadcast spectrum. So the question, I don't foreclose the opportunity for potentially a 5G operation within TV white spaces because the 3GPP standard is working hard on allowing that to occur. And so that may be something that moves forward. We'll have to see what the market is receptive to that. I do certainly appreciate what it's being used for today. And the good part about unlicensed spectrum is we don't know exactly what it's going to be used for. The good folks, operating the DSA and working on dynamic spectrum and the frequency coordination is the ability to change based on the needs and the dynamics of the marketplace. And so I certainly appreciate where this may go. We're taking advantage of where it is today, but going forward, 5G may be a real possibility.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. I have a question for Peter. Have operators in Kenya taken up the offer for more spectrum to cater for traffic needs due to COVID-19? I repeat it. Have operators in Kenya taken up the offer for more spectrum to cater for traffic needs due to COVID-19?
Okay, thank you very much. As you all know, when the pandemic started, the order for social distancing and stay home was resulted to people working online, and therefore that put a strain on the existing capacity of the operators. Because there was now increased demand for both home users and businesses. As you know, the operators were also required to provide the service and maintain good quality of service regardless. So immediately they approached the authority to get more spectrum, of course on a temporary basis until the pandemic is over. And the authority responded by offering them new spectrum bands to cover for a broadband solution like 3G and 4G. Yeah, so this has been the case for us here, as it has been for many other countries around the world. So there has been increased demand for more spectrum, our operator, in order to meet their capacity demand and quality of service requirements on the regulators. And given that now ICT connectivity is becoming a key pillar in the economy, our regulator is keen to ensure that consumers don't have poor quality of service, so that that does not contribute to the collapse of the economy. Given that the economy is already suffering a lot of damage from the pandemic, at least the ICT services must be kept at good quality in order to ensure that businesses don't suffer, consumers don't get laid off from their jobs, and the economy continues to run as we wait to see whether the curve will flatten and whether the disease will disappear completely as it was before. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. And I think it's important what you mentioned. We're facing a crisis, a global crisis, and ICTs are the key tool to avoid a bigger effect for everyone. So I think I completely agree. Connectivity is a huge issue. And now I would like to ask all of you about, now we're talking about different technologies. So how do you think that TV white spaces can benefit from other technologies like fiber, satellite, microwaves, etc.? And how do you see TV white spaces in that ecosystem? Which are the main benefits of TV white spaces?
Well, I'll start, and then my colleagues can jump in. I view TV white space as a complementary service. It's not in competition with some of the other technologies. I think they go hand in glove, and I think Vicky's presentation said it well, that they work in partnership with fiber where it is and other technologies and fixed wireless. So I view it as something that will address those hardest to reach cases and spread from there. It works, in partnership with satellite and other technologies. So it's a really complementary technology, in my opinion, and very beneficial overall.
Yeah, from Austin.
Yes,
yeah, I will not agree less with the commissioner. The TV white space is a complementary technology and opportunistic as well. So it's something that goes through development, and at the current development that we have, we expect that it's going to be further developed. It's not going to stop at the level it is now. So, like you're asking about 5G and TV white space, there is nothing that stops in the future 5G being used for TV white space. But the problem that I have for Nigeria is that the spectrum we are talking about is very limited. And if you consider that the quantity of spectrum that is needed for real 5G technology, talking about contiguous 80 to 100 megahertz. And if you look at the UHF itself, it's not having more than from 470 to 694. That is what we have now, considering that you don't even have the broadcasters there at all. The broadcasters are there. So it's going to be a serious challenge, except just some aspects of 5G will be deployed for TV white space at that time due to spectrum limitation, although some other spectrum could come handy in the future that we don't know about now for TV white space. I think that's what I will have as comment at this moment.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to comment about that question?
Yes, may I? Okay. The TV white space is a complement of other technologies, and it can also use them. For example, the TV white space can be connected to the backhaul and the backbone with fiber cables, satellite or microwave, but its deployment is much easier to can provide services to wider area with higher quality and lower cost. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I also can't agree more with my colleagues with regard to the complementarity nature of the TV white space technology vis-a-vis the other broadband technologies in place, like fiber and 5G satellite. And in complementing these technologies, as we know, TV white space tries to maximize the spectrum utilization aspect, where if these technologies are not using a certain portion of their band, TV white space can utilize that and increase efficiency in utilization overall, and provide services to many who could not probably afford those other services, which if TV white space was not there, they would remain unconnected. So for me, I look at it from that angle, where it's coming to enhance the use of spectrum and provision of services to ensure that unconnected people get connected and the served people get served. So it's something that we should all join hands and support. Both as regulators and as industry level, because the cardinal aim of a spectrum manager is to ensure higher utilization efficiency of whichever band that has been allotted or allocated for a telecom or an ICT service. So if you're told this duplex gap or that guard band has been lying idle, and today possible to utilize it in a certain way, that should be initiative that should be lauded, as long as it doesn't interfere with the internet. So in that complementarity, TV white space increases the efficiency of utilization, increases the number of connected, and reduces the cost of even providing for that service. That's all I have to say, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have a lot of questions, and I'm afraid we won't have the time to take them all during this session. Thank you for everyone that sent the questions. It's amazing to see so many. And we have many about the urban initiative. So, Vicky, I would like to share some of them with you because there's many. I'm being asked if the urban initiative is only in the US and the UK. So if you could please provide more information about that. I'm also being asked about the model that you are using to calculate the number of households that are covered in the US. And if you have any estimations about households that have been covered in Africa and LATAM. So please go ahead, and I will summarize after that with a final question for all the panelists.
Sure, it's really great to see all the excitement about the Airband initiative. We're absolutely excited about the work that we're doing. So let me clarify if I wasn't clear in my opening remarks. Airband is global in scope. In fact, our roots are actually outside the US. We actually made an intentional pivot to do work in our own backyard, Microsoft being a US-based company just about 3 years ago. So currently we have projects in 20 countries. And so I just wanted to clarify that. With respect to our households, and I think the question was, how are we counting coverage here in the US? We typically, when we look at coverage, we typically think of a household covering anywhere between 2.2 to 2.5 people. And so you just kind of extrapolate that out, and we use as sort of a base, a benchmark, as it were, for when we're looking at how we're actually helping to close the broadband gap. We look at the data from the FCC, which is the best available data, and it's only getting better as the commission continues to refine the data set. And so when you sort of, using that benchmark of, somewhere roughly between 2.2 to 2.5 people, sometimes it's a bit more. For example, we have projects that are in tribal lands, the household number tends to go up a bit, but we essentially sort of take that number and extrapolate out. And so if you look at that, our overall coverage currently in the US is about 4 million people, of which a little over 1.2 million, that was as of March. I think it's just going to continue to grow. We were covering about 1.2 million people who are residing in unserved rural areas as part of the United States. I think there was another question about what our coverage is in Africa and Latin America. So again, I want to kind of remind you of the overall coverage of our projects outside the US, and that's 16 million, of which 14 million are in unserved rural areas. If you sort of take it that, a lot of those coverage numbers are in India, which is probably not shocking. The household numbers are, many multiples of what you look at in terms of what you look at as typical here in the US. And so if memory serves me correctly, if you look at sort of where we are in Latin America and Africa, our coverage is about somewhere between 1.6 million to 2 million of that sort of broader number. Was there another question that I missed, Martha?
There's so many, I'm really handling here.
I'm happy to answer any questions. And
what we can do is we can keep some of them, and at the end we can come back after the other panel. But it is great to see such a lot of questions about this. I would ask Professor Engineer Austin about, there is a question for NCC. On NCC, from your views there, how soon will the TV white spaces guidelines be approved in Nigeria? And can those with interest in TV white spaces, when could they go ahead and deploy? That's an anonymous question.
Yeah, I answered that question earlier.
Oh, sorry.
I talked about what we need to do. Right now, we've done the compilation of the guideline, putting into consideration the responses that we received from the consultation. And by the end of this week, we'll be sending it to the legal team, who will take a decision whether they want to do public inquiry or the consultation that we have done is sufficient. If it's sufficient, all they need to do is perhaps frame the document with legal terminologies and submit to the board for approval. So we think it's not depending on what they want to do. If they want to do another public inquiry, when they publish the document, it will need to be published for 3 weeks. So if we add 3 weeks to the time that they publish it and they compile the responses, that if they don't do the inquiry anymore, I don't see it lasting up to a month before we get to that level where we get it through the board. So we're looking at that the broadband plan, like you said, put it at Q4, but I am sure we may not need to wait to Q4 before it gets finalized. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. Well, there are many questions that won't be answered. I just have a final question to close this session. What do you think? I mean, there are many regulators that might be watching this webinar. What would be your advice to those regulators in those countries that are still developing or looking towards developing TV white spaces regulatory framework?
Well, I'll start, and then I'd be interested in my colleagues' comments. From my perspective, I would say to welcome the technology, to open up and work. We have had a lot of progress in the United States, and other countries have as well. To look to those, we've had fits and starts and some good steps and some bad ones, and we've learned from that. And hopefully you can skip some of those steps and won't have to go through that. But I would welcome the technology if I were a regulator elsewhere, and what it can bring and the complementary benefits it can bring to connecting those throughout the world who are in need of access. And so I think that's the how it will be a little bit different in each country, I suspect, but welcoming is my key advice.
Thank you. Peter, maybe you can talk about the experience you had also with the universities. Would you like to advise on that, or?
Yes. For us, we engaged. We got into an MOU agreement between University of Strathclyde and our local university here called Strathmore University. So our plan was to come up with what do we do to enable TV white space technology to thrive, and eventually how do we use that platform to bring on board dynamic spectrum access in other bands. So we came up with a study that looked at establishing a web portal, and eventually did a geolocation database. We also made a decision to have all equipment to be type approved or accepted within our territory. And the strategy here is to ensure that wherever you come up with such equipment, there must be the origin must, where the equipment came from, it must have been tested and conforms to certain standards that we require. And eventually, the aim is to enable a geolocation database to determine which channels are free at what location and what use conditions can be imposed for the users who would like to use that spectrum for ICT services. So this has gone well with the framework and with the study that have been going on, and now we are at the stage of validating this framework now to open up the TV white space to other players who are not part of the study. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Moises, do you want to add something? Like, what would be your advice for our regulators?
Okay. We are still waiting for the contributions of the public consultation, and many new ideas may emerge. But one suggestion that I give them is to never forget to primary users of the service, the TV broadcasters. They play an important role on the process, and they can be real partners in this process. But if they feel they are being harmed, the result will not be so good. Okay.
Thank you. Engineer Austin, is there something you want to add?
Not exactly.
Okay. Okay. So thank you very much for your comments. I really think it's important to consider the technology and to give it chances, and it's important also to take care of incumbents. I think that is one of the key aspects of dynamic spectrum access. It's like it enables an efficient use of the spectrum while protecting the incumbents. So it's clear that they should be part of the discussion and that they should have the certainty and the rules that will allow them to continue operating and growing. So I would like to close now this panel. Thank you very much for your comments, for your important insights. And now let's continue with the next panel with the industry. I think we would ask them what they could do to have more deployments and more use cases in place. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. My name is Lydia Karoun. I also work on the Airband initiative, but I specifically work with our international partners and lead up our international commercial work. So I'm very excited about this panel today. Like was just said, I think it's a great chance to highlight the work that our partners are doing and how we can all build a more inclusive ecosystem to allow them to provide affordable last mile connectivity and continue doing that. So first up, I would like to introduce Silvia Jaramillo, who is the general manager at Anditel, a Colombian-based telecommunications company with over 30 years experience in the field. Silvia, I have a question specifically based on your experience in the field and your longtime standing. How would you define the ideal sustainability model in which projects like the ones you deploy can be extended in time beyond the resources of their immediate sponsors?
Thank you, Lydia, and thank you, Martha, for the invitation. Anditel has over 40 years of experience connecting the most remote places in Colombia. We are an operator of telecommunication solutions and digital technologies that uses integration to promote connectivity for building and managing solutions and specialized platforms. Our business purpose is to bring social gaps using technology. We provide and manage solutions in world-class communications with an offer in multimodal connectivity. We have been contractors for the Colombian Ministry of Communications and the Colombian Ministry of Education for 15 years and have internet connectivity to over 15,000 schools in rural areas of Colombia. We have witnessed firsthand all the development of these programs and how their focus and implementation have been evolving over time. We started by bringing computers and internet to the schools and to the general population in rural Colombia, but we learned that just bringing connectivity doesn't have a transformational effect on the population. So did the Colombian government. These programs evolved and slowly started introducing training and appropriation programs to involve the schools and the general public. The use of connectivity started to shift towards the connectivity with purpose. We trained and accompanied the population in developing their productive projects based on this connectivity. We learned that when you focus on ways to maximize their work, connectivity can bring opportunities to these communities. We had projects where we use technology to improve their productive processes and commercial processes in agriculture, arts and crafts, book designs, anything you can imagine. We implemented an online platform for these initiatives. Unfortunately, when the sponsorship from the Ministry of Communications ended, all the communities got disconnected. The most difficult question to answer is how to make sustainable this connectivity. For us, this question translates in who will pay the bill after the sponsorship is over. In our experience working with these communities, people in the rural areas of Colombia don't feel the need to pay for connectivity because they have always relied on the government to pay for it. They're used to being connected and disconnected, and still they'd rather wait for a new government-funded program than for paying themselves for it. In an ideal world, we believe that if we want to make projects sustainable beyond sponsorships, we need to link this connectivity directly to their jobs or occupation and find ways in which the added value generated by the use of the internet brings additional revenue to them, allowing them to start covering the costs. We believe that we need to bring purpose to this connectivity, link technologies into productive processes, and work closely with the specialized agencies to make this type of deployment successful and meaningful. We have been working together with Microsoft for the past year, promoting their urban initiative in Colombia. Without a doubt, being partners with Microsoft has been instrumental in finding sustainable connectivity in the rural areas of Colombia. As part of our strategy, we want to bring together opportunities with government and the private sector in order to give connectivity access to over 700,000 people. Together, we have met with over 15 influential private companies in Colombia and are in the process of developing customized plans with them to help us close the connectivity gap. We are structuring our projects by merging connectivity with technology and finding the best tools, programs, and ideas within the Microsoft portfolio to best influence these communities and find the best possible social results, thus trying to find ways of future sustainability. Today, we have implemented 2 very successful connectivity programs connecting around 50 schools and implementing projects with the community. We have hosted training sessions for teachers, girls empowerment programs, entrepreneurship, artificial intelligence, etc., and many other activities within these communities. We estimate that with these 2 projects, we're covering a population of about 9,000 people. Finding ways of making rural connectivity sustainable has been one of our main concerns for many years. We're confident that with technologies like the white space, the early adoption regulations in Colombia, and the empowerment and help from organizations like Microsoft will be the key elements to finish this puzzle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sylvia, and really hear your perspective on how to provide value beyond government sponsorships. Next up, I'd like to introduce Brian Karaoke from Mowing Networks, the managing director. Mowing is an internet service provider in Kenya focused on delivering affordable access to largely unserved communities, and actually was one of the first, if not the first, Airband partner. So very excited to have you here today, Brian. My question for you is, again, given your depth of experience in serving some of the most unserved communities, what are some of the roadblocks that you've identified to further increasing internet penetration, and how can we think creatively, and how do you think creatively about increasing access to the internet?
Thank you, Lydia. Yes, as you've said, Mowing is a connectivity business for rural Africa. We are based in a town called Nanyuki, which is 3 hours north of Nairobi, the capital of Kenya. And from here we serve customers across 10 counties in the country, with a population and a cover of about 9 million people. So we've had quite a bit of time to think about how we can create solutions for serving of people in rural areas. Now, that being a focus. So you asked me how people can think creatively about increasing internet access. And I think one thing that is available to us is to think not just about how to increase internet access for entire groups and entire regions, but to think about increasing internet access at a demographic level. The work that we have done in this area has led us to believe, or has shown that in most places there are certain parts of the demography that are completely left behind. And one example is women. 40% of women that have access to the internet in the areas in which we operate, without any intervention, will not make use of the internet. And it's not just the data that we have that shows this. We've seen some data produced, for instance, by the DSA, who last year in their mobile gender gap report showed that even though smartphone ownership was increasing quite aggressively across Africa, the use of mobile internet was not increasing at the same rate for women as it is for men. Actually, there's quite a sizable gap between the use of mobile internet by women and by men. So what this means is that just providing access to connectivity, just putting into place the infrastructure, creating the tools, does not mean that everybody who has access to those tools will make use of them in the same way. And very much what that is that you have opportunities to go online, but some people don't have the resources to take advantage of those opportunities to the same extent. And that points to other issues other than internet access being involved. And those issues revolve around several things. We believe that they revolve around how infrastructure is distributed. They revolve around the costs of access, which do not represent the same affordability for different parts of the population. They revolve around cultural barriers, which do exist, and the content that is available on the internet, which is attractive for some demographics but not attractive to others. And if those issues are solved, then what we're talking about is, even with the same infrastructure that has been rolled out, bringing on board 40% in this case of a segment of the population that makes up half of the population. And there's a pretty big opportunity to think in that way about increasing internet access, not just here in Kenya or in Africa where I am, but across the world, because it turns out that gap exists in most emerging markets. And without resolving those issues, then the historical exclusion of certain segments of the population, the historical exclusion of women, and that's the social exclusion, economic exclusion, cultural exclusion, unfortunately, will be replicated from the analog world to the digital world, and not just replicated, will actually be widened as we drive people from offline to online. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. As you know, the closing the digital gender divide is near and dear to my heart, and I think it's really interesting to think about how you think of that not only as a social obligation, but as a commercial opportunity, which at the end of the day it is. If half of the world's population isn't engaging with the internet in the same way, what does that mean for business value? So thank you, appreciate it. Next up, I'd like to introduce Jalel Sager, CEO of New Sun Road, a California-based benefit corporation providing electricity and internet access to the world's most underserved places. Jalel, good to see you. My question for you is, how can a mixture of technologies create an affordable solution to meet the needs of the most vulnerable communities? And what other technologies can we find in or add to the technology toolkit that can help us deliver added value to those end users?
Thanks, Lydia. Good morning. It's nice to be here with our longtime partners at Airband, and thanks for the question. To get started with this, I'd like to introduce you to what we think of as the public library of the 21st century. It's strange to think of a public library as a technology or as an amalgamation of them, but it certainly is the case in this example. And as you may know, in the United States, public libraries were an essential tool for raising up the social circumstances of rural areas in the 20th century. So we at New Sun Road are connecting rural populations around the world through a combination of renewable energy and sophisticated radio technologies. They're all controlled and guided in fleets through the cloud, in this case, Azure. So New Sun Road is based in California, but our technologies are deployed across 4 continents. We're a public benefit corporation, and our mandate is to develop technologies to speed energy and internet access for underserved populations. So to get to the root of your question, we discovered several years back that the cost synergies between renewable energy and connectivity were very high. We found in places such as Uganda, first, that we could provide internet effectively and efficiently to local populations as we brought them renewable solar energy. So this combination allowed us not only to provide a gateway to the world's information, but also to precisely monitor and control the underlying power and network system, right? So let me talk a little bit about the energy management system. I think this is an important technology for lowering the costs. What does it mean? The building you see behind me here, we built in Aldea Llano Grande, which is a rural school in Santa Rosa department in Guatemala. So for my money, it has the most sophisticated energy management system of any public school in Central America. I can turn the lights on and off within this school, limit the power from individual circuits, and control the lights, fans, and banks of computers from my laptop in California within a fraction of a second. So this feels like magic. It certainly feels like magic when we're demonstrating it down at the school and telling the kids that this goes all the way through the cloud and back here and explaining how that all works. To go further into your question, so one, renewable, precisely controlled solar electricity is very important in our paradigm. To go further into your question, looking at new technologies, the default connectivity option we normally choose is cellular. It's ubiquitous. We know how to boost a bad 3G signal into enough throughput to allow a dozen students, as you see up here in this center, to use the internet at once comfortably. However, radio technologies such as TV white space hold even more promise. They offer us the opportunity for non-line of sight broadband streams at community centers such as this one, which would boost the speed of the network from something like 2 megabits to more like 25, even higher with channel bonding. So good connectivity and capturing the value of emerging technologies such as TV white space is crucial to lowering the cost equation. We're managing around 400 to 500 sites around the world, mainly in Africa, Latin America, and the United States. Something like 75% of them can benefit from the use of TV white space as a tool. Even more important, we have 1,000 schools on our list with the Ministry of Education to electrify and connect in Guatemala with this technology, right? It will be much easier in many cases to do it with TV white space, and the advantages it brings to these communities where we sponsor digital literacy trainings for girls and women in the community are nearly incalculable. You have some examples of these programs here in this center. In the picture just above me, none of these students had ever touched a computer before this day. We're even worried about touching the mouse, these 24 students up in the picture. And now all of them, like Marta here, who's my pal at this school, have certificates, are certified in digital literacy, and also importantly in STEM education for women. A program that's been designed by my colleague, Dr. Susana Arachea, Guatemala, who deserves some recognition for that. So we have an ambitious vision to conclude of rural communities lifted up in their social circumstances via a gradual introduction to the informational power of the internet using these technologies and lowering costs. Most importantly, what we're doing here through operations and maintenance of these solar systems is lowering the operating costs through this precise control. Because for many of these communities, getting out, running technicians to fix the system, to take care of it, is very expensive. Just the trip out ruins the business model for a year. So what we're doing is enabling control of these in fleets and optimizing their working schedules such that they get the most out of the solar resource and the most bang for their capital expenditure buck, which is very important. So I think we need to do two things to pick up on what Sylvia was saying earlier. We need to work with 3 social technologies as well, as on top of our work as technologists, software experts, machine learning experts, and power systems engineers. We need to work with companies such as Microsoft, national governments, development mechanisms, multilaterals, to come up with innovative blended finance mechanisms to support the scalings of centers like this in rural areas. 2, we need to refine, test, and replicate the business models that allow these centers to become at least partially financially sustainable. And it's the biggest challenge, and that's why Sylvia had the hardest question. We also need to serve the local community in employment, education, health, and so many other fields where information is crucial. We're seeing that now, as my friend Kevin Connolly likes to say, more than ever. So finally, we need to find a way to implement on a large scale promising technologies such as TV Whitespace, which is a very important tool in our belt, very promising, and as it comes into the view of regulators around the world, and particularly in our target markets in places such as Kenya, and do things along the lines of what's been done by Martha and her colleagues previously in Colombia to unleash that, so that the world's ocean of information can reach the places where it's scarcest and needed the most. So this is our vision for Latin America and how technology, and Africa and beyond, I should say, and how technology can enable it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's always really interesting to hear the perspective of when energy access comes into play as well. So appreciate it. Next up, we have Greg Jarman, who is our only panelist from the United States. He is the Chief Development Officer at Watch Communications, an ISP based in Lima, Ohio, and working in Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky. So Greg, thank you for being with us today. As our only panelist providing connectivity in the United States, you encounter a totally unique set of challenges. What role do you see broadband playing in increased productivity and ultimately economic growth within the United States?
Well, thanks for the question and the opportunity to share. I really appreciate that. You can't really address the economic benefit that broadband contributes today without acknowledging, those unique set of challenges. Over the last 10 years, there's been a growing desire to address the digital divide. Federal, state, and local governments, along with private industry and nonprofit groups, have been investing billions of dollars to programs to try to improve access to the internet, specifically to build networks where service is not being offered today, or to improve networks where service does not meet the definition of broadband. These programs existed prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, but since then, there's been an increased urgency to solve the problem. What used to be a discussion of just digital equality and doing the right thing for all citizens has become far more focused. For example, schools from coast to coast started remote learning, and we no longer can view the problem with a faraway lens. We used to say we could provide a better education to our students if we could provide them capable and affordable broadband. In just a few months, this has all changed. Now we are clearly stating, because of the pandemic, we can't provide education at all to some students without it. This creates, a whole different economy that needs to be addressed, and a different kind of network that needs to be addressed. These changes how the internet impacts economic benefit. So we have to address the problem differently, and I think the United States is attempting to address it from that perspective. This challenge isn't limited to just education. Healthcare, for example, is no different. Elective procedures were mostly eliminated during this pandemic, and simply going to the doctor became a bigger challenge, if possible at all. So telehealth has gotten a heightened focus. Being able to access your doctor from your home internet connection becomes critical. And without ubiquitous broadband, a different focus on why rural and underserved areas need to have broadband service. Businesses sent their staffs home. Coming out of the pandemic, glaring problems relating to this became apparent. Businesses had to ask, do my staff have the ability, the technical needs, including broadband, to work from home? And the internet, for providers like us, the internet shifted. It used to be that a large portion of that daily usage was on commercial networks, on educational networks. We've seen increases of over 40% in most of our networks, and over 50% in some. So these changes are creating both challenges and opportunities. As a service provider, we kind of see these opportunities and challenges from a very unique seat. In addition to broadband usage, we also see it in the demands of people who are calling in looking for service. Some people are looking for internet for the first time, and they're looking for it to apply for benefits or to to keep a job they already have. And our belief is that we play a critical role in this, and we take that very seriously. Watch Communications employs both fiber and wireless services, and we take the view that both are critically needed to efficiently, address broadband access. But our belief is that rural areas, in rural areas, wireless takes on a very, very critical role for that last mile. At the same time, of all these kind of pandemic issues that have added both opportunity and challenges to providers in the U.S., I would say that simultaneously we're seeing unprecedented demand for services, and the services that are being asked for sometimes are in order to empower products and services that broadband supports. New products, new services, new economies are emerging, as we speak. The broadband networks that we're all passionate about and drive, that's what we're all passionate about, is what's driving these new economies, right? It's what we're all here for. And as Commissioner O'Reilly stated, TV white space plays a role in driving broadband usage in rural America, where terrain is particularly challenging. By default, then, it also provides economic benefit for those folks in the same areas for all the same reasons I mentioned, whether it's educational benefit, healthcare benefit, business expansion, remote workers, that new jobs can be found in areas that were never there before. And I think our businesses around the world are now looking to rural areas and seeing them with heightened broadband opportunities, that a whole new workforce can be added to our roles. The FCC support in TV white space is paramount. The increased power and antenna height provide service opportunities in areas our company would have never considered in the past. We have tower locations in eastern Ohio, for example, and southern Indiana, where line of sight services probably only about 10% of the homes we could service with effective use of TV white space. So we're really excited about what, the advocacy that Microsoft's brought to this, the support that the FCC is providing. And it's my hope that with these changes, that TV white space can become the technology that becomes front and center to many of the citizens in the United States that are in rural America. I appreciate the opportunity to talk, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Greg. It's really interesting to hear about the influence that the FCC has on your projects and the collaboration there. Given the timing, unfortunately, I don't think we have time for any follow-up questions. Martha, I assume that's the case since we only have 3 minutes left, but happy to follow up on chat or email as needed, especially around, like Vicky addressed, airband related questions.
Thank you, Lydia, and thank you to all the speakers. Yeah, unfortunately, I think we were overwhelmed with so many questions. But I think the questions you asked and the feedback we got from the different companies are very interesting, and I think the attendees appreciated that. So yeah, I think we might follow some of the questions after. We are planning to publish a blog from the DSA, so we might take that opportunity also to address some of the issues. And anyway, this session is recorded, so it will be available in our website. So I would like to conclude highlighting some of the different aspects that were discussed today. So we had the opportunity to hear about the Airband initiative from Vicky, and also to hear how it is a global initiative that is really providing opportunities and engaging with different stakeholders all around the world to increase the connectivity. And we saw some numbers and some very interesting partnerships. I invite all the attendees that were writing, and I saw so many messages from different corners of the world, from different parts of the world. So I think we will have a further engagement. We also had the opportunity to hear from 4 big countries and specialists from the high-level representatives of the government about the last regulatory updates in terms of TV white spaces. So we had divisions from the US, Brazil, Nigeria, and Kenya. And we also heard some of their concerns and also about their experience and their vision. So I think that is also a great proof of how TV white spaces is growing, is active, is up and running, and will continue to grow. And finally, we had a lot of interesting insights from different companies from all around the world too, that are presented. Microsoft Urban Initiative are being excellent and are providing more and more connectivity. So with this, I would like to thank you all. Please keep any concerns, just send an email. The DSA is open to talk to all the different interested parties, and a series of webinars that we will have before the DSA summit. So we expect to have a couple more. Stay tuned and please follow us on social media. Thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you to all the speakers and have a great day.